I would like to formally declare open the council meeting of the Colac Otway Shire on the 22nd of February 2023. Almighty God, we seek your blessing and guidance in our deliberations on behalf of the people of the Colac Otway Shire. Enable this council's decisions to be those that contribute to the true welfare and betterment of our community. Amen. I'd like to start this afternoon by acknowledging the traditional custodians and lawmakers of this land, their elders past and present, and welcome any descendants here today. I'd like to advise that this council meeting is recorded and live streamed with the exception of confidential matters. This includes the public participation sections of meetings. The live stream recording of this afternoon's meeting will be available on the website as soon as practicable. By participating in open council meetings, individuals consent to the use and disclosure of the information they share at the meeting, including any personal and/or sensitive information. Please note that other than an official council recording, no video or audio recording of proceedings is permitted without specific approval by resolution of the relevant council meeting. I would like to note that Councillor Tosh Jake Finnegan took the oath of office before the Chief Executive Officer in the Ray Street Administration Building, Colac, on Wednesday the 18th of January 2023. A copy of their oath will be attached to the minutes of this meeting in accordance with the requirements of Section 32C of Local Government Act 2020. Congratulations, Tosh. I note that all councillors are present, given that we're still waiting on a countback to fill the council vacancy. Now, moving on to question time, Colac Otway Shire encourages community input, and integral to this is the opportunity provided to ask questions at a council meeting. A maximum of 30 minutes is allowed for question time at council meetings. Community members wishing to ask questions of council by video conference were requested to register their intention to do so before 5 p.m. on Monday the 20th of February 2023. No requests were received. I have received questions in writing from James Judd, Dave Wilson, Emma Colson, Nasser Cobb, Noel Peterson, Edward Martin, Jan Radcliffe, Jason Schramm, Peter Fillmore, Sandy Maxwell, David Walsh, Lee Barrett, Robin Alsop and Marina Lewis. We have quite a lot of questions ahead of us today, and so before we move to these questions submitted, could I have a show of hands from those in the gallery who may be wishing to ask questions this evening as well? Mr. Webber and Mr. Billings, thank you. We'll do our best to get through as much as we can, but we do have to get on with the meeting at some stage. We just want to start with a statement. It's a bit of a reminder really, but councillors and officers welcome and encourage questions from our community at our council meetings. The majority of questions received are respectful. However, some of the questions we receive are presented in a manner that reflects emotion rather than respect and accusation rather than inquiry. Some questions include statements, allegations and accusations that aim to embarrass or damage council, current and former councillors, officers and other organisations. This is unacceptable and it's disrespectful for our council and this meeting. Council's governance rules provide clear guidance about the expectations we have of people who ask questions of council. I intend to chair a meeting in a manner that is consistent with these standards. The majority of questions tonight will be read out without omission. In a small number of cases, I'll read the relevant part of the question, but I'll not repeat unreasonable statements or allegations, nor will they be published in our minutes. I believe that this approach is consistent with what our community should expect of their mayor and councillors. Questions that aren't responded to at today's meeting will receive a written response. Question 1 from Mr. James Judd. Has the Colac Otway Shire Council yet done anything definite to make certain the Colac 2050 growth plan will be introduced on time? Do not forget, it's under 30 years until it must be delivered in full. Plus, planning takes years before it is delivered, and to introduce this plan, very much construction must be done first, while you are persistently cutting down on infrastructure expenditure. Response from General Manager, Community and Economy.
Through you, Mayor. The Colac 2050 Growth Plan is a strategic land use plan that guides the future development of Colac. Council is currently working on a number of initiatives, including the Deans Creek Precinct Structure Plan and 2 rezonings to increase residential housing supply to Limonite. These projects seek to progress development in accordance with Colac 2050. Each of these projects is considering the infrastructure that is required to support new development, and the timing of delivery of infrastructure upgrades will be linked to the staging of development. Land developers will pay for much of the infrastructure for new residential development in greenfield developments, and therefore Colac 2050 is a very important strategic plan that does have Council's commitment and will guide public and private investment in infrastructure, but is not a plan that directly determines Council's infrastructure budgets.
Sorry, question 2. Why are council letterheads allowed to be used by staff of this council to answer queries to council when no reference or person's name sending out a letter or section of council the letter is sent from quoted? Response from Manager, Communications and Governance.
Thank you for the question, Mr Judd. I am aware that you have received responses compiled by many officers, not any one person, and so no one signature was relevant. There are a number of other circumstances where letterhead is used to provide information or a position of council, not an individual staff member. We agree that people may want to follow up on information provided in this manner, and we'll try to be sure to include information about this in future correspondence.
Thank you. Question 3. How does the Colac Otway Shire Council justify its existence now it is telling residents of this shire to chase up governments to provide services it is responsible to provide? Response from Chief Executive Officer.
So through the Mayor, thank you Mr Judd for your question. As always, some specific examples really help us to understand your concern. We do receive requests quite often about a variety of things that are responsibility of other authorities and agencies. However, if that was not the case with your example and is a matter that council should address, then we would want to make sure we do that. If you could perhaps let us know an example or the specific example that has caused you concern, we'll make sure that that is investigated through our complaints policy and procedure, and that way we can learn and do better next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 4. Why was proper English not used by council when it rolled out the purple glass only bin? It should have been beer and spirit bottles plus glass containers with no lids. By including beer bottles, you are authorising non-glass items to be put in this bin. Since beer bottles have not legally been allowed to be manufactured in Australia for many decades of glass, beer bottles in this country are made of material with very different quality to true glass. Response from General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
Through you, Mayor. The type of glass that is used in beer bottles is able to be disposed of in Council's curbside bins with the purple lid. This information is included in our A to Z waste guide under B for beer and our purple bin fact sheet. Both of these documents are found on our website, but we are happy to provide them to anyone who phones or emails seeking this information. Your question prompted us to review the advice about beer bottles on our Good Sort app, which has been very popular with residents. I didn't see anything specifically listed on the app, so thank you for helping us identify another improvement we can make to the Good Sort app.
Thank you. Mr Judd submitted another question that exceeds our word count, and so we received that response in writing. Questions from Mr Dave Wilson. Question 1. After several weeks of operation, I find this new drop-off scheme is unworkable. The new scheme provides a large skip bin with segments for mixed recyclables and glass. Rubbish continues to be hydraulically lifted into the truck as before. The issue is that the lip of the skip is too high, roughly 1.5 metres off the ground. This requires lifting a very heavy bin containing glass or mixed. It is not possible for many people, especially older or physically challenged, to lift their wheelie bin into the skip. For those of us with families, a fortnightly collection schedule means we require a 240 litre bin for mixed recycling and a 100 litre bin for glass, both of which are extremely heavy when full. Even replacing our 240 litre bin with multiple smaller bins would leave us with bins too heavy to lift into the skip. Surely this issue would have been discovered during the trial of the new scheme. Another solution must be found. A response from General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
Through you, Mayor, and thank you for the question. We want to make sure the service works well for our contractors and community and appreciate your feedback. We have had this issue raised by some other people, and Council has lifting equipment ordered and on the way to help remove some of the manual handling challenges. Unfortunately, this equipment has been delayed, and so we will take on your feedback, review how our sites are operating, and look at interim solutions to make our drop-off stations work better for our customers.
Thank you. Question from Emma Colson, question 1. Colac Otway Shire recently awarded the tenure of the Forest Caravan Park to Belgravia Leisure. This large-scale corporate entity now has notified the permanent van site holders that they must remove their vans from the site. There is a core group of locals who have for many years had their second home in the Forest Caravan Park. These locals contribute a great deal to the fabric of Society of Forest and have worked closely with the recent Forest Mountain Bike Trails revitalisation project, a project partly funded by Colac Otway Shire. They will now be kicked out, in inverted commas, of Highview Crescent in scenes reminiscent of the street made famous under similar circumstances. Why were protections not put in place for these locals when the tenure was awarded? Has Council any recourse to negotiate with Belgravia to ask them to reconsider this decision? Response from General Manager, Community and Economy.
Through you, Mayor. Thanks for the question, Ms Colson. I do have quite a long response because there's a number of questions from other community members that have been asked today, so I'm going to collate that into one response. Council undertook a community consultation exercise prior to preparing the expression of interest document for this lease. This consultation was reported to Council at a public meeting. The expression of interest document subsequently prepared by Council stated that proposals for the lease of the Forest Holiday Park were to include the proponent's plan for the option of medium-term and annual tenants. This clause is included in the final lease. Council understood when it entered the lease agreement with Belgravia Pro for the Forest Holiday Park that they had committed to providing existing annual site holders with an initial 12-month agreement, and during that period there would be a review of the existing arrangements and future improvement plans. The previous leaseholder had established arrangements with a number of site holders that were independent of Council. We now understand that many of these arrangements were informal and may not have properly considered compliance matters in sufficient detail. At the conclusion of that lease, there was a situation where the new leaseholder Belgravia Pro and the existing annual site holders needed to establish fresh arrangements with the new operator. Council is not a party to these agreements, and so Council wrote directly to as many annual site holders as we could to make sure that this was clear. The proposal from Belgravia Pro, which has been incorporated into the lease, is also consistent with this. Council is aware that the way that Belgravia Pro's future plans have been presented and explained to annual site holders has been more alarming than expected. Council agrees that the annual site holders should be provided more information, particularly about compliance matters that Belgravia Pro has identified, as well as reassurance about how this matter will be resolved. We've asked Belgravia Pro to slow the process down so that these things can be worked through. We also understand that Belgravia Pro has recently informed annual site holders that is open to offering all long-term annual site holders a site. This is an encouraging update. We also understand that the location of annual sites will be based on the response of annual site holders wishing to return, but that all sites will be required to meet current safety codes and regulations, regardless of where the final locations are. This requirement should not be new and is not driven by Belgravia Pro. This is simply an important requirement to keep everyone safe and ensure sites and the overall park comply with the relevant laws and regulations. Again, this means that everyone should have a common understanding about these issues, and hopefully solutions can then be found that deliver the benefits expected and needed by the operator and the community.
Thank you. Question from Nasser Cobb, question 1. Why the contacted councillor still lists on COSC, Colac Otway Shire Council website, 2 ex-councillors and not listing their replacement? Response from Manager, Communications and Governance.
Through you, Chair, the website has been updated and is current.
Thank you. Question 2. I noticed that the Council has granted Belgravia Pro the right to evict annuals from the Forest Caravan Park. This was not stated in the lease contract released for community consultation. The annuals are part of the fabric of the community and the Council should have been aware of this fact. A, what are the reasons for such an action? And B, as best practice, can this action be reversed and put to community consultation? Look, I'll address this and thank Mr Cobb for the question. The officer's response to Ms Colson's earlier question, which covers the same ground, has explained how the community consultation informed the expression of interest process and then what has occurred since. Question 3, Mr Cobb provided introductory comments in relation to his next question, but I am just going to read out the question. Would the Council consider instituting a CEO Code of Conduct as well as a more comprehensive staff Code of Conduct to improve productivity, accountability and transparency? The Local Government Act establishes a framework that applies to CEOs, their responsibilities and performance. Council has a CEO employment and remuneration policy which is made pursuant to Section 45 of the Act, and Council has established a CEO Employment Matters Advisory Committee. The position description for the CEO includes further details about expectations and key performance indicators. Council hasn't considered instituting a CEO Code of Conduct as there are already a range of things in place that relate to how CEOs conduct themselves. Question 4. Judging by the publicly available plans and reports, the economic development strategies and plan are focused on tourism. This is disappointing and a narrow-minded approach. The Shire has far more economic growth opportunities than the Council outlines. The Council does not provide a vision and does not even consult the community, in brackets, on Vision 2050. On that score, the Council failed to deliver. The Council needs to diversify the Shire's economy. There are many opportunities for the Shire's economy to grow beyond the hospitality industry. The Shire has a robust dairy industry, sheep and beef production and various crops. Fishing, timber and sale yards all contribute to the local food and fibre sector. This can be further complemented by emerging high-quality niche producers. Renewable energy projects hold opportunities to embrace a high-tech and increasingly vital industry. Similarly, opportunities in aquaculture, especially seaweed, are enormous growth areas. Council officers can consult the Moyne, Yarra Ranges and Alexandra's Council's economic growth plan to understand the way vision is. Would the Council consider developing an economic growth strategy that goes beyond hospitality into manufacturing and serving our farmers and renewables, agriculture, especially seaweed, as well as connecting with the natural environment? Response from General Manager, Community and Economy.
Through you, Mayor. The Colac Otway Shire Economic Development Strategy 2019 to 2024, which can be found on Council's website, recognises the diverse nature of economic opportunities in our Shire. The strategy identifies numerous sectors, which reflects the broad diversity of our Shire's economy and articulates actions to be undertaken for each of these. Identified sectors in the strategy include, but are not limited to, agriculture, forestry, fishing, construction, manufacturing and food production, energy, retail and services, visitor economy, which includes tourism, culture and cultural landscape and events, healthcare and social services. While the document identifies the visitor economy as a key sector, it's not the primary focus of the strategy. The strategy adequately addresses the manufacturing, agriculture and energy sectors. While the strategy may not identify every economic opportunity available in the Shire, it doesn't preclude Council from considering and supporting new and emerging sectors and opportunities on their merit as they emerge.
Thank you. A question from Noor Peterson. Where in the lease contract to Belgravia does it state that they have the power to evict the annual tenants? Why, when the town was consulted about the new lease, the issue of eviction and the running of a commercial business by Belgravia was not part of the parameters of the lease? What are the reasons for such decisions? Given the long, tense and sensitive topic between COS and the caravan park, why has the forest community not been consulted, given the impact it will have on the township? Response from General Manager, Community and Economy.
Through you, Mayor. The response to Ms Coulson's earlier question has explained how the community consultation informed the EOI and the arrangements under the lease that resulted.
Thank you. A question from Edward Martin. Mr. Martin has a number of questions for today, and I'm going to read them out first and then have officers provide a single response. Questions pertaining to Mount Gellibrand Fire Access Track. Recently, on the 7th of February 2023, the Illawarra CFA and other CFA brigades were called to a tractor/grass fire on the property of Turkeith. As a result of this fire call, some CFA brigades were required to use the Mount Gellibrand Fire Access Track. What the CFA tankers encountered was a fire access track that was in a serious state of disrepair. Certainly not fit for emergency vehicle response, with large holes and very rough, etc., not to mention the very long grass. So with that explanation in mind, I therefore ask the following questions of Council. Question 1, who is responsible for the upkeep and maintenance of the Mount Gellibrand access track over its entire length? Question 2, would it be Council or Asciona Energy? Question 3, would I be correct in assuming that Asciona would be responsible for this maintenance? Question 4, I'll refer you to the original Mount Gellibrand Wind Energy Facility Planning Permit, PL-SP/050257, and the conditions attached, specifically relating to this fire access track. Page 9, Environmental Management Plan, page 12, Section D, subsection 1. Section D of the Environmental Plan states that a wildfire and emergency prevention and response plan be developed. The plan must be prepared in consultation with the Country Fire Authority, the Department of Sustainability and Environment, and the Colac Otway Shire Council Municipal Emergency Management Committee. Could you provide me a copy of this original emergency response plan? As I said, Mr. Martin submitted a further 6 questions in relation to this topic that exceed our work count for a response here, but I understand that our officers are going to catch up with Mr. Martin and work through these issues at a meeting, hopefully in the near future. Could I have a response from the General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations, please?
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Martin, for the questions raised by the local community. Council will undertake to investigate the issues raised through the Emergency Management Unit as an operational matter due to the number of external agencies that will need to be in contact and provide information and responses. As the Planning Minister provided planning approval, we do not have a copy of the documents that you have referenced, and our Emergency Management Unit will work with you and the Department of Transport and Planning in seeking copies of these documents mentioned and to engage with the required stakeholders to ensure the review of the plans are taking place as well as future risk reduction strategies. Slashing where possible was undertaken this week, a little later than normal due to the weather and recovery activities across the Shire, and we will undertake an inspection of the potholes. I thank Mr. Martin on behalf of the community in agreeing to work with our Emergency Management Unit going forward and addressing some of the longer term considerations.
Thank you. A question from Jan Radcliffe. We are in a climate emergency. Natural disasters like fires and floods are occurring at an alarming and unprecedented rate, and scientists tell us this will only get worse unless we drastically cut our carbon emissions. In our Shire, the Blue Water Fitness Centre uses large amounts of gas and therefore produces a lot of carbon emissions. When community members called on Council to convert it from gas to heat pumps, we were told that this would not be possible without a grant. Towards the end of last year, I inquired of the Victorian Minister for the Environment about the availability of such grants and was told that there had been some, but that applications had now closed. My question to Council is, did Council apply for one of these grants? If not, why not? Response from General Manager, Community and Economy.
Through you, Mayor. Council has not applied for a grant to convert its heating system from gas to electricity. Based on the feasibility study undertaken for this concept, it wasn't deemed viable to undertake the project at this point in time unless fully funded by other parties. Council is unaware of any grant programs available that would fully fund this type of project.
Thank you. Questions from Mr. Jason Schramm. Question 1. How could this council possibly think that spending money from the sale of Bruce Street, which is a windfall for the ratepayers, on more feasibility studies and strategic work is a good idea? Question 2. Would it not be better spent on infrastructure projects that would otherwise not be budgeted for, like a few things in the myriad of master plans adopted or requests from the people that live in the Shire that come via petitions or budget suggestions. A response from the CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the Mayor to Mr Schramm, thank you for your questions. Councillors will consider whether Bruce Street proceeds should be allocated later in today's council meeting, and therefore it's not appropriate for officers to predetermine either the debate nor that decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 3. Would this council have the leadership to direct the CEO to do better with the budget to allow for strategic plans and feasibility studies in the mega millions of dollars collected from ratepayers so that other income or windfalls that come council's way won't be wasted and this community can get a few things built? I'll respond to this. As you're aware, developing the council budget to meet the many expectation needs of our community is a well-considered activity. Infrastructure and non-infrastructure initiatives are both important to building a great future for our community. I'm not going to say any more as the Bruce Street matter will be considered shortly. Question from Peter Fillmore. The Apollo Bay community are very interested to hear from COS the answers to the following 2 questions regarding the now scrapped Wild Dog Creek to Skeens Creek walking and cycling trail. Members of the community have indicated to COS over the last 4 years that the trail would be unlikely to be passed by the state government as it clashed with many government policies and legislation, but they were ignored. Can COS please detail a breakdown of the spending of $1 million on the planning of the now scrapped Wild Dog Creek to Skeens Creek Trail? Response from General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
Through you, Mayor. Council expended funds provided by the Australian Government for this trail project on investigations, design, approvals and project delivery resources. The total expenditure to date is in the order of $1 million. These costs will be acquitted through the funding agreement to the Victorian Government. Council has obligations to other levels of government under the funding agreement and will not disclose further detail or publicly release documents without the explicit approval of the funding bodies.
Thank you. Question 2. Did any councillors have a conflict of interest when voting for the trail and the awarding on the contract to the planning company? Response, General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
Through you, Mayor, Council awarded the contract at a meeting open to the public and held on the 27th of January 2021. The minutes did not record any declarations of interest by councillors.
Thank you. Question from Mr Sandy Maxwell. During the tender process, we were told by the council representative in charge of the process that this would be best practice. Given that Colac Otway Shire went on to engage a company who, for the first 4 years of their tenure, pay a mere $4,000 per annum, claims to have never seen the community feedback that the Shire undertook, kick out 27 families who contribute to not only the town's economy but to its volunteer base, and who also now intends to set up, in a town with a very small permanent population, a store, bottle shop and bike hire in direct competition with local businesses. How is this best practice? And do the Shire ever look into the ethics of how a company operates before handing them the golden goose? Response from General Manager, Community and Economy.
Through you, Mayor. Thanks for the question, Mr Maxwell. We've addressed part of your question through an earlier response to Ms Colson. However, you have included additional issues regarding checks that Council may do on potential lessees. Our standard practice for leasing property includes due diligence with respect to financial capacity, as well as undertaking reference checking and discussing performance elsewhere with key stakeholders or lessors.
Thank you. A question from Mr David Walsh. After recognising the importance of the Irrawullapi Road Basin upgrade in 2014 and allocating ratepayer funds 2 years ago in 2021, plus government funding, my first question to Council is, when will this project be finished? Response from General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
Through you, Mayor, and thank you for the question. The project is subject to 2 external funding agreements, one with the Australian Government and one with the Victorian Government, and both agreements set timeframes for the project. The preliminary design concept has been completed and the procurement process has commenced, appointing a consultant to undertake the detailed design. The project is planned to be completed by April 2025.
Thank you. Question 2. How many times has the water over road water over road signs been put up in Deans Creek Road in the past 12 months? Response from General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
Through you, Mayor, over the past 12 months, water on the road signs have been put in place 10 times. Each time they have been left for approximately 1 week. On one occasion in April 2022, during the flood event, we left them for 3 weeks.
Thank you. Question 3. How many times has the road closed sign been put up in Deans Creek Road due to flooding over the road in the past 12 months? Response, General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
Through you, Mayor, the road closed sign has been utilised 4 times over the past 12 months.
Question 4. Is Deans Creek Road the most flooded road in the Colac District? Response, General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
Through you, Mayor, Deans Creek Road is the most frequently flooded. Other than the October flood event, we rarely have to close any other road, if at all. Water on road signage is rarely placed on any other road.
Thank you. Question 5. Since my first submission to Council with regards to an extra culvert under the Deans Creek Road in August 2020, Council were planning to survey and design this in the 2021 financial year. After many interactions with Council officers, lost emails, unanswered emails, etc., we've had a concept design and now we are down to detailed design. The question is, when are you going to do this culvert? Response from General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
Through you, Mayor, at this time only design work has been funded. The design work will inform a cost estimation that can be considered as part of the budget process. Therefore, we have no commitment to timing for the culvert works.
Thank you. Question from Mr. Lee Barrett. In a media release on the 25th of January 2023, Council announced that it established an interim agreement with Belgravia Pro until 30th of June 2023 for the park to operate while it considers options for a longer term arrangement. Is Council paying Belgravia Pro to manage the park until 30th of June, or is Belgravia Pro paying Council? Response, General Manager, Community and Economy.
Through you, Mayor, it's not appropriate for Council to discuss the details of the commercial arrangements with Belgravia Pro. The financial result of these arrangements will be dependent on occupancy rates and in turn income, along with operating costs incurred to operate the park.
Thank you. Question from Marina Lewis. The Council Plan 2021 undertook to deliver a climate change action plan in partnership with other organisations by June 2022. It is now February 2023. When will Council deliver its climate change action plan for community feedback? What other organisations are involved in the development of the plan? Response from Manager, Planning and Strategic Focus.
Through you, Mayor. It's expected that the draft Climate Action Plan will be considered at the April 2023 Council meeting before it's released for community input through a public exhibition process. Many organisations, government departments, agencies and community groups have been consulted during the engagement phase of the development of the Council's draft Environmental Sustainability Strategy and the Climate Action Plan, as well as information being sought from other resources. This includes the Climate Action Team's A Call for Action for a Climate and Biodiversity Action Plan in Colac Otway Shire. Local organisations that have participated in the development of the plan include the Colac Chamber of Commerce, the Colac Large Employers Group, the Southern Landcare Network, the Otway Climate Emergency Action Network, the Climate Action Team, the Southern Otway Sustainability, Colac Otway Landcare, Upper Barwon Landcare, Durangamate and District Landcare, Birregurra Community Group, Friends of Barwon and the Colac Sustainability Group.
Thank you. That concludes the written questions. I know there's a couple of people who'd like to ask questions from the gallery. Mr. Billings.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. In relation to, my question needs a bit of a preamble and I apologise for that. On the 26th of January this year, Australia Day, I attended the citizenship ceremony at Colac. As I arrived at the venue, I was struck by two things. One was that there was no external evidence that a significant Australia Day event was to take place, and the second was that there was no Australian flag, excuse me, no Australian flag on the council complex. When I entered the venue, a young lady introduced herself to me as the events manager for the Colac Otway Shire. I raised with her the issue of no Australian flag flying on the civic complex. Her response to me was that maybe it was a breach of flag protocols. She did undertake to pass on my concern, and I also spoke to a councillor the next day. On the 8th of February, I received correspondence from Council's General Manager of Corporate Services in response to what he deemed as my complaint, re no flag. I quote from his response: "Flags are displayed outside council offices when staff are in attendance. The day of the 26th of January 2023, being the Australia Day public holiday, there was no staff working at the council offices, so no flags were raised on that day." Excuse me. It is my contention that the only item correct in that correspondence is that January the 26th was a public holiday. There was on that day in the civic complex a council event for which the Australian flag should have been raised. It is my understanding that there was a number of staff present, including 3 councillors. My questions to you, Mr Mayor: do you endorse the content of the correspondence to me from the General Manager of Corporate Services? That's one question. The second question: will you make a public apology to the Colac Otway community for not flying the Australian flag on civic buildings on Australia Day?
Thanks for the question, Mr Billings, and the preamble. I haven't seen the correspondence you refer to, but certainly the Australian flag should have been flown on that day in accordance with protocol.
Thank you. Will you make a public apology? It's nice for this to hear, but a number of community people had raised the issue with me. I seem to be more accessible than some councillors, and there is general concern out there that that was an appalling oversight. So will the public apology to the community be forthcoming?
First of all, I'm not sure why you're more accessible than other councillors. Our phone numbers are on the website. We're well known, and no one's raised it with me, and I'm pretty accessible down the street just about every day. But that having been said, I think it's appropriate that in answer to your question that I do apologise there was no Australia flag being flown from this building in Australia Day.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I'm sure the community will. It's another more private issue. I've now received correspondence from the council officers, some council officers, now on 2 occasions. It would probably be courteous if they checked the spelling. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr Webber, you had a question?
Tony Webber, Otway Forum. The first question is about house demolitions. There's been 2 houses demolished in Apollo Bay, one in Maringo and one in Apollo Bay. The one in Maringo had just been renovated with double glazed windows, new kitchen. The ownership changed. New owners came in with a large demolition crew and just destroyed the house. A lot of people got quite emotional about this, and they feel that there should be recycling done, not just demolishing of the house. In Apollo Bay itself, another house was demolished, an older one, probably had really good hardwood timber. There's a shortage of that. So can the council do anything about this?
Yeah, so thank you, Mr Webber, for your question. The short answer is I don't think that actually council does have a role in prescribing what happens to waste in these situations, or actually reusable material. It's not waste is clearly your message, and I accept that. I think that this is something that I would hope that the Victorian government does consider as it implements its Recycling Victoria strategy over the next 10 years. We're in about year 1, so 9 more years. At the moment, their focus is very much on helping councils do better with municipal collected waste. but I would expect that commercial waste from construction sites in particular is another ripe opportunity to see material reused. We don't have a role at this time in enforcing that, however. As long as it's not disposed of inappropriately, i.e. dumping in public areas, asbestos, etc., then it's actually not something we can intervene with at this time, to my knowledge.
Thank you. The second question is on about a property up Tuckshan Road that's about 150 acres. The people will not have any stock on the property. It's quite steep. The neighbours have offered to graze it because they're worried about the fire situation with dry lightning. And it is real concern because if we have a westerly blowing, it could come down into the town. So can the council do anything about large properties that will not graze them and leave the grass at waist height?
Yeah, probably one for us to take on notice, I think, Mr Webber. I'd encourage you to follow it up if we haven't captured enough details. Follow it up and we'll see what our fire prevention officers might be able to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the gallery? Yes, step forward, please. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I already submitted the questions, Emma Coulson, to General Manager here. I don't understand the response in plain English. So I think the response means that the existing leaseholders will be kicked out, albeit slowly. Is that... I'm sorry, I find the response quite long and wordy and not simple and straightforward for me.
Through the Mayor? Yeah,
Do you want to say
absolutely.
something, Mr Siren? Or
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, appreciate it was a long response, and when someone's reading it out, it might be hard to comprehend the full information, and so we're happy to send you the detailed response. No, I wasn't saying that that all site holders were going to get kicked out, and I don't believe that Belgravia are saying that either. So the latest information we have, which I think the annuals have as well, is that any annual site holder that wants to remain at the park will be given that option to remain.
Remain in their current situation or have to bid for a new allotment at a certain price which is to be disclosed? So kicked out by stealth is my question.
That, to me, sounds like a statement.
Yeah, can I just interrupt there? I'm not sure that this is the forum to have that debate. Certainly happy to talk to you, but I don't think it's appropriate to use terms like kicked out by stealth, and certainly council aren't kicking out anyone.
Evicted by stealth. I understand council's not, but the guts of it is there was consultation with community that said these people are important, and now it seems like the contract perhaps doesn't allow for them to remain, which was against the wishes of the community. I still don't understand where we're at.
Perhaps we need to have another discussion offline. Some councillors in the CA did attend a meeting at Forest a few weeks ago.
Thank you for that.
And there was ongoing discussions. I'm aware of some of them, but they're still progressing, I think, Mr. Siren. So perhaps we need to set something up in due course with the affected people again.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. I might just pause for a minute to get a glass of water, I think. Done a lot of talking. Councillors, I note there's no petitions or joint letters. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest, please, in relation to the open meeting? No worries, thank you. Councillors, I propose that we move to confirm the minutes of the following council meetings. Council meeting held on the 14th of December 2022 and the unscheduled council meeting held on the 1st of February 2023. Do I have a mover? Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Do I have a seconder? Thanks, Councillor Costin. Is it to be opposed? Thank you. Could I have a show of hands in favour of that, please? Thank you. That is moved 6-0. Councillors, will now move on to the Officer Reports. Item 9.1, finalisation of Development Plan, Irrawulipi Road, Eliminate, which is opening up land for housing. It's a council priority, and it's pleasing that we're continuing to see regular progress on our strategic land use. The purpose of this item is to present for adoption a final development plan for Development Plan Overlay 2, DPO 2, Area 4 at Irrawulipi Road, Main Street, Airy Street and Hart Street in Eliminate, following consideration of the submissions received in response to formal exhibition of the plan. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Thanks, councillors. We have a recommendation in front of us. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Is there a seconder for that? Thanks, Councillor Hart. Is it to be opposed? Thank you, Councillor Hanson.
Yep. So Council adopted a development plan for this area, this Irrawulipi Road area, in 2014, and since then, very little development had occurred. A revised development plan was placed on exhibition following the November Ordinary Council meeting, and one submission was received. And a number of issues were raised by that submitter, and, putting it pretty loosely, the submission sort of revolved around that it's not, not an ideal planning outcome. And I agree with the submitter that it's not the 100% perfect planning outcome. But council is faced with a housing shortage, and often infill development won't be ideal, as you're really working around past decisions, multiple landholders, and there's many obstacles. And I think what this development plan sort of does is try and work around that to sort of, as best it can, open up the chances or increase the chances of some development in that area and housing outcomes for the community. So I will be supporting this motion.
Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Hart, do you wish to speak?
Just briefly, thank you, Mayor. This particular site was subdivided and has been built on over the years, and people have their houses and various garages, as you would expect in a subdivision like this. What's happened over many years, many decades, is that these blocks are considered quite large compared to what current building blocks would be, and some people would like the opportunity to subdivide parts of their land. When you have a development or a block of streets that has existing houses and outbuildings, it can be a bit difficult to work out how you get the roads in to allow that sort of subdivision to occur. And what this process is trying to do, and tried to do in 2014, is to create an indicative plan, if you like, so that the landholders know that they can subdivide their land long as it's generally in accordance with this particular plan. It's always going to be difficult when you come to an area of large blocks where people have quite rightly built houses and outbuildings over many decades. It's always going to be difficult to try to design that, how you subdivide what essentially are backyards, if you like. And so this plan is trying to make that somewhat easier. And I would like to take the opportunity too to thank the submitter who has expressed their view in relation to this new plan.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Any other councillor? Thanks, councillors. I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? Thank you. That is carried 6-0. Councillors, item 9.2, allocation of net income from the sale of the property. The sale of this land's been a very positive outcome for our community, and it's great that the planning application is lodged and progressing well, and so things are on track. The purpose of this item is to respond to the resolution of Council at its unscheduled Council meeting on the 4th of May 2022 that required a report to Council in February 2023 relating to the sale of 36 to 52 Bruce Street, Colac. To Councillors, Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. When you're ready, I've got a different resolution than is written in the agenda paper. It just includes some extra words.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. You're flagging a motion with a variance on what's in the agenda. Do we have any questions of officers at this stage? Lanson.
I've got a question. Oh, I've got a question for Mr. McNeil. Just around the $300,000 that's up on the screen to support future strategic land use planning projects. Would you be able to explain what kind of projects that would be or what kind of work that would be?
Through you, Mayor, one example of a key project that needs to happen over the next few years is the Apollo Bay Structure Plan review. That wouldn't account for all of that 300,000, but that would be a significant one. There's other projects such as reviewing the town boundaries for some of the towns north of Colac, which includes Cressy, Beac, Corrook, Alvey, and so on. Those towns have been designated through our growth planning previously as opportunities for growth and are getting further demand, and so that's a project which Council might undertake in future years. So there are two examples of plans which that funding would assist in occurring.
I've got a follow-up question. With that Apollo Bay Structure Plan review, can you just explain a little bit more about that, like how that would help? Can you just... No, I just want to tease that out a bit more, what that actually is.
Through you, Mayor, the Apollo Bay Structure Plan was done in 2007, so it's quite dated now. So it's very timely that it be reviewed. There were new planning controls put in place as a result of that structure plan around 2009, and they imposed constraints on how land, particularly in the outer parts of Apollo Bay, might be developed. It is timely that given that there is a strong demand for a diversity of different housing types in Apollo Bay for key workers and affordable housing, it really is important that we relook at what is the neighbourhood character today in Apollo Bay, what is it that the community would like to see in terms of how housing is developed, and for that to be reflected in our planning policy so that we can encourage the housing that's needed in Apollo Bay.
Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Any other questions? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm moving the resolution that is on the screen. As you can see, there's some extra words in 2C.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that motion of Councillor Hart? Councillor White. Is it to be opposed? Councillor Finnegan. Thank you. Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Mayor. I think when we're talking about the sale of this Bruce Street property, and it's worth remembering some history on this, and the fact that this is the second time that Colac Otway Shire sold this particular property, and we're now discussing how those proceeds be used. So ratepayers' funds have had to be used to repurchase the property. Ratepayers' funds had to be used to address some issues in terms of the neighbouring Tips site and the potential risk of gas coming onto the site. There's been extensive monitoring over the years. The property had to be re-subdivided from what it was when it was repurchased. All of this was funded from general ratepayers' money. So I think it's worth keeping that in mind when we discuss the history of this site, that we've now been able to sell it. It's going to be used for housing, which is a great outcome. And today we're discussing the possible use of some of the funds. The funds involved are over $2 million net funds. I think briefly we need to realise and remind ourselves that there are already cash shortfalls of all the particular reserves Council has on its books. Somewhat ironically, one of those is the rehabilitation of the LV tip, which we'll have to spend money on at one stage. And this particular site, of course, is next to the former Bruce Street tip, which has had significant amounts of ratepayers' funds, general ratepayers' funds spent on that. So in recognising the history of that this isn't perhaps the windfall that it is seen, we've converted an asset to cash in a sense. I think we need to look at future investments and improvements that will benefit Colac Otway Shire, and that's what those 3 points are from 2A, B and C. I'm going to go through them in reverse order. C is making some funds available to improve the infrastructure at Lake Colac Caravan Park. That's a significant, important park for the community and for visitors. It has an economic contribution as well, and having that available will be a potential investment that can secure a better long-term outcome for that Lake Colac Holiday Park. So that's what C's all about. B, we've got a list of town planning projects that need to be completed. Town planning is a creature of the state government. Rezoning land, changing your planning scheme, getting rid of roadblocks and the assessment of Colac Otway Shires in its planning. There's many roadblocks in Colac Otway's planning scheme as things have changed, and that may be residential land around those small towns that were mentioned by Mr McNeil. Obviously the Apollo Bay structure plan. It may be some of the overlays to reduce some of those complexities. All of those are strategic planning projects that are required, have potential economic benefits if they're sorted out, and potentially make administration of the planning scheme for the public an easier thing to do. So you have, it's an investment, and the reason that that's required is because the planning scheme, which is a creature of state government, is a very complicated instrument, and changing it, improving it, is a complicated process. So that's an investment for the future, for the entire municipality to have some funds available for those projects. And the third one, I've gone in reverse order, is the feasibility of housing on 69 to 71 Nelson Street, which is the rear part of the office in Apollo Bay. When the transfer station was purchased in Apollo Bay, the idea was that the works depot might be able to move to that. This is to look at the planning for that and ultimately housing outcomes for Apollo Bay. This is investments for the future while retaining funds to reflect our budgetary condition, and I think it's much better outcome than perhaps some short-term projects that may have generated some interest.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Councillor White, you reserve. Councillor Finnegan, you opposed.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I'm voting against this motion, and it's not because I believe the idea of a feasibility study into easing the housing crisis in Apollo Bay is not worthy of consideration. It's rather that I believe the income from the sale of Bruce Street shouldn't be used on any feasibility studies. It should be used on infrastructure and projects which the community needs. To deal with housing shortfalls in Apollo Bay, I would recommend following in the footsteps of Warrnambool City Council and introducing a registration charge on all short-term accommodations such as Airbnbs, with the funds from this earmarked for projects within Apollo Bay. We've got many issues in this shire that need immediate funding to address. Perhaps funds from the sale of Bruce Street that are proposed to be earmarked for the feasibility study down in Apollo Bay for the sale of Nelson Street to address the housing shortage. Pardon me. Could be better used in dealing with the glaring safety issues at the Colac sale yards. a bridge from Harris Street across the Baronga Creek to enable the community to access the Coles shopping complex, or even a dedicated BMX track for our youth, seeing as council seems intent on destroying jumps that have been built by teenagers since I was in my mid-teens without wanting to provide an alternative.
Thanks, Councillor Finnegan. Any other councillor? Councillor White, Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Finnegan, for your words. I just thought I'd bring you up to date with some of the works that have been underway, some of the studies that have taken place in relation to the Apollo Bay housing study. In June 2021, we declared a key worker housing crisis. In doing that, we noted the work underway to facilitate social and key worker housing in Colac. We also noted the substantial shortage of key worker housing in coastal areas. Part of that declaration of a housing crisis responded to some reports which you might call feasibility studies, which were conducted in the G21 area. There was a key worker and essential worker affordable housing study, and there was a stage 2 study which has just been complete. And the outcome of that study is for a set of key actions to be undertaken in relation to the Nelson Street site in Apollo Bay. So it's probably a misnomer to say this 120,000 is going to a feasibility study, because the feasibility studies effectively have already been done.
Point of order has been called. Councillor Finnegan.
Point of order relates to relevance, and what's on the screen there, it refers to feasibility. I would argue that relates to a feasibility study. Is that not correct?
The wording is feasibility of key worker housing development. So I guess it depends how you read it, but I take your point. Can you focus on that, Councillor Costin?
My point was it's probably a misnomer, because the actions proposed are in fact the action plan from the stage 2 regional worker housing study. The other point that Councillor Finnegan has missed is that this is an allocation of 120,000, and officers are in discussion with external funding agencies to turn that 120,000 into 480,000. So it's possible we would get 3 times the amount of that money back in a grant, turning that into 480,000, which would be a fantastic outcome. If we don't proceed with the 120,000, we effectively will be delaying that process or suspending that process forever. And I trust officers are advanced in those discussions to have proposed this as the strategic way ahead to obtain more worker housing in Apollo Bay. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Costin. Any other councillor? Councillor Hanson.
I won't be supporting the motion that's before us. I actually do agree with most of the things that are up there, and I thank Councillor Hart for his comments and around the $500,000 that's will be allocated if this motion gets through to the Colac Holiday Park, and the comments he made. I think the $300,000, and I'm working backwards like Councillor Hart, $300,000 to support the future strategic land use planning projects is excellent. It sounds like the majority of that will go towards the Apollo Bay structure plan review, and I think that'll be a really important piece of work to to open up more opportunities for housing at the Bay, and you could probably argue that that's where the biggest bang for our buck will be through that Apollo Bay structure plan review. And also, I think what's really important is the town boundaries planning for our small towns. We know there's a lot of demand for land in our small towns, stretching, the whole Shire. And, I think, particularly Beac, Forest, Cressy, those areas really need that strategic work done because there is an enormous appetite out there for land in those smaller towns from all types of people. So I think that's quite important work. But I think what's missing from this motion is some of the opportunities to fund some of the things that the community are really keen on. And yes, it's not a windfall, $2.5 million from Bruce Street, but it certainly was a good outcome. But we're not funding any of the kind of initiatives that would be great for our community. And I guess I'm just taking examples from the things that the community throwing out there themselves, like small projects, big projects, money potentially for resurfacing the Illuminite tennis courts, a BMX track, more seating and tables around our Shire. People love to go walking around our Shire. They love to have picnics. They're the kind of things that, we don't always have money to do, and it would be ideal to use some of the money from Bruce Street for those things. People are talking about a full basketball court on the Lake Foreshore dog park, upgrades to playgrounds, a barbecue area in Wayuna Estate. They're all projects that people have been waiting a really long time for, and I think that's really what's missing from this motion. I'm glad Councillor Costin raised the true cost of the feasibility study for the Nelson Street project. It is around $500,000 for the feasibility work, an enormous amount of money. For a project that is a multi-million-dollar project, if anything was to go ahead, maybe $20 million around that, maybe even 30. And I think probably not enough is understood by council to be, I certainly don't feel comfortable supporting it at this time. It'd be a project that would potentially mean relocating the depot. But at the moment, that is a needed site. And so I'm not comfortable with that part of it, and probably some of the things that are lacking from this motion, so I won't be supporting it.
Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Councillor White, you're reserved.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, the sale of Bruce Street has, rightly so, has attracted a lot of attention and debate and thought and challenges around the community as to how these funds should be spent. Look, I hear what Councillor Finnegan and Councillor Hanson are saying, and there's a lot of merit to what they're putting before us. Particularly, there's some worthy ideas around, what we might look at in the future in relation to registering of short-term accommodation, and some of the projects that Councillor Hanson referred to have got merit as well. But there are other funding opportunities for a lot of those projects, and a lot of those projects have been achieved through the LCRI grants, and we've got another grant round coming up to look at some of those projects which also have merit. I think the bit we're stuck on is whether we should be spending money on feasibility studies. And I can understand how community and people think, oh no, not more money on a feasibility study. However, we can't move projects along until we really know what is in front of us and what it's going to look like and what the reality of the project is going to be. So we do have to spend money on feasibility and to understand what we're doing. The council did declare a housing crisis, when was it? Back in June 21, was it? 21, back in June 21, and housing has been a priority. Bruce Street has given us opportunity to really think about how we can use some of these funds to put into this really important priority. And it's a huge challenge, not just for us, for Australia, for the world. Housing is incredible. So I think it's really important that we do consider funding the feasibility study, and if it can attract other funds, even greater benefit. But to get it started and to get a real understanding of what we can and can't do is really important. So I think with Bruce Street freeing up these funds to do that, we need to take on the recommendations, and I would pass this recommendation.
Thanks, Councillor White. Councillor Hartright, a reply.
Thanks, Mayor. I think Councillor White's made the point very well that there's other funding sources for some of these other projects, and less so than for some of these that we're putting in here. You wouldn't get 100% funding for this feasibility study that's been spoken about. It's also worth remembering that if the land is able to be subdivided, the land at the back for housing, that of itself will generate significant revenue as well as creating more housing opportunities. As for the suggestion that there's an extra rate or charge or some sort of charge on holiday rentals, that would require extensive community consultation, and even if that was to proceed, you'd probably be talking about a year or more, then raising the revenue. So you'd be talking about another year, 18 months of delay at least, before you'd even start looking at this. I think the housing needs in the municipality are immediate, and so the sooner we can start this work, the better. We shouldn't be waiting for some charge that I doubt the public has even heard of suggested here until today.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Councillors, I'll call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? Thank you. The motion is carried 4-2. Division. All those in favour? Councillor Costin, Councillor White, Councillor Hart, Councillor Potter. Against? Councillor Hanson, Councillor Finnegan. Thank you, Councillor. Item 9.3, Part Road Closure, Hall Street and Cressy. Purpose of this item is to seek council approval to commence the statutory procedures to discontinue the road described as Hall Street in Cressy. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation, and I think there might be another one as an alternative there somewhere. Is any councillor going to move a recommendation or a motion?
Mayor, I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Is there a seconder? Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Is to be opposed? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll try to give the short explanation of what's going on here. Essentially, there's a road that physically exists in Cressy that is on private property. So we're seeking to close that road. There has to be a consultation process for this, and that's point 2 in this resolution. And people will have an opportunity to speak to their submissions if they want to. And so this will come back to us for a final decision, but we're starting the process to essentially close this road subject to consultation because it's on, the physical road is on private property.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
I think Councillor Hart's explained it perfectly.
Thank you. I think he has. Any other councillor? Councillors, I'll put the matter to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried 6-0. We'll move to item 9.4, the G21 Geelong Region Plan Refresh Project. Purpose of this item is to seek a funding commitment from Council to support a refresh of the G21 Geelong Region Plan in 2023. Do we have any questions of officers? Councillor Finnegan.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is, does the benefit we will derive from this $10,000 ex-GST exceed what we are spending?
CEO.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Finnegan. Through the Mayor, I'll respond. Yes, I believe that there will be more than $10,000 of benefit to Council by participating through a partnership. The work is significant. And whilst that is addressing matters across the region, Colac Otway Shire itself will also be much better informed, much better placed to advocate and to do further planning work. If we were to do that as a standalone project, it will cost us well in excess of $10,000.
Thank you, CEO.
Any other questions? Councillor Hart?
Thanks, Mayor. I just wonder if we could have one broad example where this particular plan has helped council to date.
So, Councillor Hart, probably off the top of my head, hard to say a specific investment, but what it has done is certainly shape and guide a lot of other strategic planning work that has happened, but importantly advocacy work. So when we apply for funding, we often refer Victorian and Australian governments to these strategic documents and say, this imperative, this initiative, what we are seeking your investment in is supported by not just our council, but 5 councils across the region, plus our business partners in the G21. So it really strengthens our request for infrastructure funding, our request for investment in economic development that might actually be for other parties, not council directly. And so often the direct benefit isn't to us, but to our businesses and our communities.
Councillor Hart?
Thanks, Mayor. Did this plan have any relevance to the Colac 2050 and the land use and need to subdivide land to residential, particularly in Colac?
So through the Mayor, it's one of a number of plans that would have benefited that. There are also complementary plans like the Regional Growth Plan, transport strategies, housing strategies, but they all together provide the kind of case that we're making when we talk about Colac 2050 and housing and growth.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Any other questions from councillors? Councillor Hart, you'll move the recommendation. Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Is it to be opposed? Councillor Hart, did you wish to talk to it?
Yeah, I'm not going to knock back that invitation. Thanks, Mayor. Just briefly, I know at times we get criticised at all these plans and what have you, but they're needed in order to work towards the planning improvements and the infrastructure you get, whether it's roads or rail infrastructure, hospitals, all these sorts of things are dependent on having the information that you can show to the politicians and the state government and federal officials. So that's where all these plans fit in, and $10,000 will be put in as well as money from the other councils and government money. So I think the return on these, while today you look at it, what are we spending $10,000, comes back many, many times. And I think we've got a great arrangement with G21 Alliance over the years. I mean, you drive the duplicated highway. We didn't just do that by ourselves. G21 had a party to that. So I think it's quite appropriate that we put this amount of funding into this revision.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Well said. Councillor Hanson?
I'll just briefly say I also support it for the same reasons already stated. It has been 17 years since the plan was developed, and I think it's really important for Colac Otway Shire as a rural council, with our sort of faster growing sort of urban neighbours, to be at the table with those councils and to be able to put forward our point of view, what the opportunities are for our, for our area, particularly around, I think our growth opportunities, but our also opportunities, to be a real food bowl. And I sometimes think that's, that's a really important voice that needs to be at the table, and that's what Colac Otway, part of what Colac Otway brings to that table. And I think it all does play a part in trying to, attract investment, trying to attract, private government investment. It has been a long partnership with G21 and quite a successful one. And I'll certainly support the refresh of the plan.
Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Well said. Any other councillor? Councillor White.
Not to repeat what Councillor Hart and Hanson have said, but I just want to reiterate the importance of collaboration and working together with our regional partners to get the best outcomes. Going it alone, we're never going to achieve what we can achieve if we come together as an alliance. And I think G21 over the years has proven that, so I strongly support this as well. And it is 17 years since, as Kate said, since the plan was developed, and it needs a good refresh, and I think $10,000 will be a very solid investment for our future.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you, councillors. I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried 6-0. Councillors, item 9.5, quarterly performance report. Councillors working hard to deliver outcomes across a wide range of services and projects. Sometimes we're ahead, sometimes we are lagging. While Council only receives this report today, it's a great overview of many things we're doing in the community, and I encourage people to read it. Are there any questions of officers? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. In the report, there's an item 1.1.6 regarding the regional key worker housing study report, and we're making decisions, strategic decisions at the moment on the basis of that report, but it still hasn't been released to the public. When do we think that will be released to the public so that the community can see the strategic directions that have been set for our municipality and for the broader regional basis?
Mr. Suru.
Through you, Mayor. Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Costin. We're working with our regional partners who have been involved in the project on the information we can release. There is some information in there that could be potentially commercial in confidence or could lead the market in some way. So we just need to be mindful of the actual information in there, but we'd be keen to release like a summary document or something along those lines so the community understand the direction and the recommendations in that study. Obviously, it also includes recommendations for a number of councils, so we need to be mindful of that as well.
Any other questions? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. On page 80, there's a reference to the Vested Benefits Index, VBI, for the Defined Benefit Super Fund. At September, it was 101.5%, and there's a trigger point of 97%, below which a call is likely to occur. Do we know what the Vested Benefit Index is as at 31st in December? And if not, when are we likely to know what that number is, please?
General Manager, Corporate Services.
Through you, Mayor, at the moment we don't know what that number is, and we would expect to be updated shortly.
Any other questions? Thanks, councillors. Officers have provided a recommendation with a report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion? So, thank you, Councillor White, seconded by Councillor Costin. Is to be opposed? Thanks, Councillor White.
Oh, just to say how important this report is that is provided to us on a quarterly basis. It is a pretty comprehensive report, and it comes from across the organisation. It gives us a lot of information about how we're progressing on our key priorities, and I really encourage the community to have a look at it. It provides transparency, and it also ensures that we're accountable to our key priorities and enables us to ask the questions where things seem to be lagging. It is a comprehensive report, and I recommend that we move it. It's accepted.
Thank you. Councillor Costin, did you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, this is one of the most important reports that officers provide to Council. It reminds us of what we told the community we would do in our Council plan, and it tells us our progress towards achieving what we promised we would do. It also talks about the resourcing available to do that work. It's one of the most enjoyable reads I see in council papers. So thank you, officers, for preparing this and for the amount of detail that's provided. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to talk a little bit about the Vested Benefits Index and the Defined Benefit Superannuation Scheme. Some people who've been around the table for a while and also members of the public will know about this legacy superannuation scheme, which has had regular or quite a few calls of local government over the years. I think the last one that Colac Otway had, which was several years ago, was around $3 million. So they can be significant and they can come seemingly out of the blue. When you look at the Vested Benefits Index, which is the measure which determines or not there's a call, you can see that between December 21 and June 22, that index worsened by over 7 points. And if you look at where we are now, we would only have to go down 4.5 points and we're in the territory to where a call is. So I think it's critically important that we keep an eye on this, that we continue, if there's ever any opportunity to buy your way out of it, it's something that I think municipalities should consider. And I think it's also one of the reasons why when you've got gains that might be seen as perhaps windfall gains, that you don't spend them all so quickly because these super calls, they can come on relatively short notice and they can be very significant. And so I think we have to always keep in mind council's finances with that ongoing risk of those sorts of calls coming to us.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, I just wanted to draw attention actually to the CEO's statement, and I think the last paragraph is probably, very important, possibly the most important paragraph, and it reads that as our community faces challenges with the increased cost of living, Council too faces similar financial challenges. Like other councils, businesses and households, Council is moving into a period of greater financial challenges as we face the highest inflation for many years and the restriction the rate cap imposes being less than the rate of inflation. We will continue to strengthen our financial asset and project management practices to ensure that public money is used effectively. I think it's important because I am a supporter of the rate cap, but the rate cap this year is around 3.5%, and I think most of us know what the rate of inflation is growing at. I think it's significantly over 7%, and that gap between the rate cap and inflation is it's growing. And I think there has never been a time greater than this where council needs to focus on sort of delivering as much as it can within our council plan, but the reality that we'll have to be more efficient than ever, and there might be things that are in our council plan or that the community expects that at this point in time might not be able to be delivered, or projects might not be able to be delivered to the the full extent that community might expect.
Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Anybody else? Councillors, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried 6-0. Item 9.6, MAV, Municipal Association Victoria State Council motion, Regional Library Corporation transition. The purpose of this item is to consider a proposed motion for presentation and consideration at the next meeting of the Municipal Association of Victoria State Council meeting. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No questions. There's a recommendation with a report. Thank you, Councillor Hart. Is there a seconder for that? Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Is the bill opposed? Thank you, Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. What we're doing here, if this is adopted, is essentially authorising that a resolution be taken to the Municipal Association of Victoria State Council meeting, calling for their assistance on lobbying on this particular issue. I'll try to turn this issue to as straightforward as possible in the short time. Essentially, the Local Government Act 2020 requires regional library corporations to transition to a different model, a different structure. Geelong Regional Library Corporation has had workshops and done work on what this process would be, and what it might involve is that the Library Corporation goes from being incorporated under the Local Government Act to the Victorian Corporations Act. So essentially, at the end of the day, by the time you do all that, you'd pretty much, from the point of view of people who use a library, have no significant change. But you'd be adhering to the new requirements of the State Government's Local Government Act. The cost of this is estimated to be hundreds of thousands of dollars. You have to value assets, you have to get lawyers and accountants involved, a lawyers and accountants picnic, and they have to come up with liquidate one entity and restart a new entity. Somewhat ironically, you'll probably be paying fees to some state government department, all for very little gain from the point of view of library users. The Library Board agreed last week that it'll be asking the Chair to pursue this issue with various government representatives. This proposal here, if we approve this today and if it's supported at the Municipal Association of Victoria, would mean that they'd also be trying to pursue some sort of assistance with these extensive costs. Again, why are we doing this? Because the Local Government Act 2020 requires it, and unfortunately that argument's been lost, and unfortunately when the Act was reviewed, I don't think the state government or the relevant people doing that were transparent with the extensive costs that this exercise involves.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson, did you wish to speak?
I'd just like to thank Councillor Hart for his work on the Library Board and for bringing this to the attention of councillors, and I think it's very valid that it's raised through the Municipal Association of Victoria, and to give this the attention that it deserves.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Thanks, councillors. I'll put this motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. It's carried 6-0. Councillors, item 9.7, Gender Equality Action Plan Update. This is a timely report as there's a lot going on this month across Australia and locally with respect to gender equality. I'm pleased that the CEO established a Gender Equality Action Plan last year and that Council has an opportunity to play a role today. The purpose of this item is to seek Council's endorsement of the Colac Otway Shire Council Statement of Commitment to Gender Equality. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. Just for shadow, when you're ready, I've got a different resolution. It has some different words in it.
Thank you. Councillor Costin, did you have your hand up? No. Any questions of officers, councillors? Councillor Hart, your motion.
So, Mayor, I'm moving what's on the screen. The differences, as you probably guessed, is in red on 3 and 4.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for the motion? Thanks, Councillor Finnegan. Is it to be opposed? Thank you. Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. This particular equality action plan, it's a requirement of the Gender Equality Act, and Council has a responsibility, I think, both as an employer and a provider of services to the public to adopt this particular recommendation. The slight changes I've put in is that the flying of the flag that's suggested at point 3 be annually and that it be included in this Gender Equality Action Plan. I think, Mayor, people give their best if they're in a supportive environment. I think people shouldn't feel the need to keep a significant part of their identity hidden, whether at university, at the workplace, or even at the council table, People seeking services from council should also be confident that they have fair access to services without any impediments due to any aspect of their gender identity. I think it's a key aspect of the individual and shouldn't be a basis for discrimination. The recommendation seeks councillors' endorsement for the plan and to fly the rainbow flag for Ida Hobbit, and I've moved a resolution that changes that commitment to annually rather than just for this year. I think the time has come for Colac Otway Shire to fly the rainbow flag on Ida Hobbit, not just in 2023 but in future years. Ida Hobbit stands for the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, Intersexism and Transphobia. So why the rainbow flag and what does it represent? It's an important acknowledgement of those who have had to fight for equal rights for the LGBTIQ community. In some cases, people actually died in the fight for equality. And for example, Harvey Milk, the first openly gay man to be elected to public office in California. Closer to home, people marched for equal rights in 1978 in Sydney and were beaten, arrested, named in a local newspaper as a result. Some lost their jobs or were thrown out of home, and eventually the march was found to have been legally held and the charges dismissed. Now, somewhat ironically, the Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras is an international tourist attraction. In 1978, it started out as a battle for basic human rights. So the flag's an acknowledgement of those who have gone before us. It's also acknowledgement that of progress that has been made. Decriminalisation in Victoria in 1981, the right for a same-sex couple to have their partners as a beneficiary on their super, that only came in 2006. The right to register their relationship and have it legally recognised in Victoria in 2008. And finally, marriage equality since 2017. Rights such as these were achieved by the efforts of thousands of people over decades, being activists. Far from virtue signalling, these are just some of the examples of real change in the last 20 years. The rainbow flag's also a reminder that LGBTIQA plus people still face discrimination, with still some feeling they have to hide their identity in university, their workplace or the like. It's a symbol for support who are struggling with their identity or people's responses to it. It's been described to me by some other people as when you see the rainbow flag flying, it's like a welcome hug, an indication that you can feel safe.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Councillor Finnegan.
Thank you, Mayor, and I also echo the comments of Councillor Hart, and I'd like to expand upon them perhaps from a personal standpoint, and I do will foreshadow that some of the things I might say might be a bit confronting, and would ask for some leniency regarding some of the terms I may use. Nothing that will be offensive to anyone else, well, possibly, but nothing that I haven't had directed at me is probably the best way to put it.
Thank you. I'll pull you up if I need to, but away you go.
Thank you, Mayor. Flying the rainbow flag on Ida Hobbit costs us nothing, and it's going to send a signal to the community that the Colac Otway Shire is taking the lead in showing LGBTQIA plus people that they're welcome in the Colac Otway Shire. Sadly, this wasn't always the case. I came out at age 14 in 2008, and I was actually serving my first term on the Colac Otway Shire Youth Council at the time. I won't go into the specifics of the bullying I was subjected to by peers, teachers and others in the community, including those in notable positions within the community, but suffice to say words such as faggot, poofter, poo jabber were thrown my way, along with fists, kicks and knees. It sucked. It was patently clear at the time our region had a problem with homophobia, as it was when comedian Joel Creasy came to town twice in 2011, was abused both times and physically chased out of town the second time, all for having the temerity to attempt to perform in Colac as an openly gay man. The response of the then Mayor Marion Crook was, in my opinion, appalling, sought to minimise what had happened and erase the voices of those who had experienced homophobic abuse in our shire. Then Councillor Crook stated that, quote, "It's unfortunate the media likes to grab onto these things and blow them out of all proportion," and, quote, "It's not like they were hurling bottles or knives at people." I can't even begin to describe the amount of rage I felt as a 17-year-old hearing that from our mayor. And on the note of raising queer voices, I'd like to specifically condemn the ABC for an article relating to this Saturday's Pride event at the Lakeview Cafe, where it appears a conscious decision has been made not to publish detailed quotes from myself in order to paraphrase what I said to support what appears to have been a preconceived bias on behalf of the journalist involved. I strongly disagree with Joel Creasy's comments from 2018 in relation to what he experienced in 2011 and 2013 being used in 2023 to imply Colac Otway is still laden with homophobia, because the reality is that attitudes can and have changed for the better. As a young queer person in the Shire, I'm thankful that we've had councillors and mayors since 2011 who have stood up for our queer community, and I feel that whilst we have a long way to go, my experience is that Colac Otway Shire is a much more welcoming and safe place than it was previously, and the presence of myself, Councillor Hart and former Councillor McCracken on council this term are a testament to this fact. I can only hope that by raising the rainbow flag on Ida Hobbit, and perhaps on a dedicated standalone flagpole in the future, we can show young queer people that they're accepted in the Colac Otway Shire and encourage them and hopefully enable them to feel comfortable with who they are, whether it be at public or at home. I'd also like to take the time to acknowledge the Eastern Mar Aboriginal Corporation for their graciousness in, agreeing to allow us to utilise the flagpole that the Torres Strait Islander flag flies on to raise a rainbow flag for Ida Hobbit. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Finnegan. Any other councillor? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Finnegan, for those heartfelt words. The Australian Catholic University undertook a survey recently and found there's still a sharp generational and gender divide when it comes to how Australians view the role of local government. And local government is often seen as overstepping, as becoming involved in contentious issues that shouldn't. But this update of our gender equity plan is well supported. Those in the age groups between 18 and 34 in the survey, who responded to the survey, consistently agreed that issues concerning climate change and the LGBTIQ plus community should be addressed by local government. So it's great to see this motion before us, and I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Just very briefly, I want to thank Councillor Hart for so eloquently describing the true history and battle that has come for recognition and equality. And we must never forget those battles, and we must never let them be minimised by anybody. I also want to thank Councillor Finnegan for being so courageous and describing your experiences and what that must have been like for you as a young person in Colac. And just say that I'm so proud and glad to be part of a council that is going to support this and is working really hard. We may not be there yet, but we are on that road to making this community a safer and more inclusive place, and I will be supporting this.
Thanks, Councillor White. Any other councillor? Councillors, I'll put this motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. The motion is carried 6-0. Councillors, item 9.8, review of Colac Otway Shire Grants Program and Guidelines 2023 to 2024. Our Community Grants Program distributes hundreds of thousands of dollars each year across the Shire to great grassroots ideas. We know it's well spent, and I appreciate all the volunteers who turn these grants into great outcomes. The purpose of this item is to seek Council's endorsement of the Colac Otway Shire Grants Program Guidelines for 23-24. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, I just wondered, in the report, it's mentioned the VAGO recommendations, so the Victorian Auditor General's Office recommendations. Can you just explain what has changed, you know, like how you've taken those recommendations on?
Through the Mayor, firstly, it was actually great to receive that report and then review our guidelines and our processes against that. And essentially, the way we process community grants is in accordance with the findings of the VAGO report. There have been a couple of minor changes just around how our assessment panels work and the recommendations we then put to council. And Ms Moore might have a couple of other specific practical ones that she might talk about.
Through the Mayor, Mr Surin's probably addressed most of the ones that I'm aware of at the moment, but yeah, we can take on notice any further details and provide those.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillors, we've got a recommendation with this report. Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. When you're ready, I would like to move something that's got slightly different words. I know I do that a few times today.
Yep, thank you. I see that up there.
Yeah, yes.
If there are no other questions, Councillor Hart, did you want to move that?
Yeah, I'm happy to move that.
Thank you as a seconder. Thanks, Councillor Finnegan. Is it to be opposed? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. This grants program has a long history and is significant importance where we can give back. Well, we're giving back ratepayers' money, I acknowledge that, but give it back to communities who are putting in various efforts in a whole range of things, and they typically have to put in matching funds or work in kind. And so we've updated those programs. I know there's some improvements in the, I would draw, well, there's several improvements, but I'd draw attention particularly to the environmentally sustainable business grants, which I think is a great improvement. I'm not going to go into all of it, but I appreciate the work of the officers in coming up with these new guidelines. I would draw attention to point 4, which is a change that I've asked to be included. Essentially, I think it was in 2018, there was a extensive change to the grant program at that time, and it include other matters as well. And so the point 4 in this resolution is just trying to make it clear that we're not trying to change those other matters. Point 10 is a student achievement award, which I think is very important. In fact, I take this opportunity to encourage the schools and the students to keep their eye on applying for those awards for the different schools across Colac Otway Shire. And there is a financial component with that award to assist people with their studies. The other issue is a capital investment in small towns, which is in point 4 of the resolution that we're changing. So essentially what we're doing is we're updating the grants guidelines and at the same time just making clarifying through point 4 that we're not trying to change these other things which in the past were included in the same resolution that changed the guidelines back in 2018.
Thank you. Councillor Finnegan.
I won't prattle on too much, Mr Mayor. I think I've done that just before. Other than to say I sort of echo what Councillor Hart has already said. and would like to reiterate that it is important that it's important work that has been undertaken by the officers to revise these guidelines, and we thank them for their work.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Thanks, Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, I just want to briefly say that I think there's been some really good work that's been done by the officers to review the grants program. As Councillor Hart said, it's ratepayers' money going back to the community, and I think it's the most efficient spend of money we get, because the multiplier, I think, of the grants and the outcomes that we get are, just amazing. I probably don't think we do enough celebrating actually what the community does with those grants. So I certainly am encouraging of that. And why I did ask the question around the VAGO recommendations, that's really around, how important it is, because it is the community's money, for the community to know that money is being spent well, and properly. And the officers have taken on feedback from recipients of grants, which I think is fantastic, but it is also important, for the community to know that, we go through a proper acquittal process after grants have been given, and that's, that's really important. But I think there's always opportunities to make the process as easy as you can for the community, but while ensuring that community money is is being spent well, and all the right checks and balances are there.
Thank you, Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a great program for our communities. To undertake works, actions, programs for something that is dear to their own heart. And it's particularly pleasing for some of the environmental grants that we've seen recently, and I'll just run through a couple. They're small grants, they're $1,000, $2,000, so it's not much money, but the community puts in equivalent in kind as well. One was the reduction of household energy costs, and this is just through helping householders to insulate their own homes, just providing the advice and the pointing them in the right direction to lower the costs of running households. There's environmental weed control projects. There is a grant towards propagating native plants, local indigenous native plants. There's also community walks and workshops to identify weeds, plants and fungi. There's river flat revegetation projects. And there's also looking at a bird's eye view of our landscape before and after project. It's a small project, but it's important. It's important to the community. It means a lot. They're things that we won't do otherwise. But the community would like us to do, and they are able to do them through this grants program. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thanks, councillors. I'll put this motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried 6-0. Councillors, item 9.9, update on appointments to committees and external organisations. Purpose of this item is to provide an update on the appointments of councillors to committee and external organisations. Do councillors have any questions of staff? Yeah, thanks, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Hanson, and seconded by Councillor White. Is to be opposed? No, thank you. Councillor Hanson, did you wish to speak?
I'll just quickly say this is just, we're waiting for our 7th councillor, and when we get our 7th councillor on board, we can, deal with this item.
Yep. Councillor White, did you want to say anything? Thank you. Councillors, no other councillors? No, good. I'll put it to a vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried 6-0. Item 9.10, Audit and Risk Committee meeting confirmed minutes 7th of December 2022. purpose of this item is to provide for information the Colac Otway Shire Audit and Risk Committee minutes dated the 7th of December 2022. Any questions of officers? Councillor Finnegan.
More just a question, considering I wasn't here or on council at this time, should I and more just from a governance standpoint, should I abstain from this vote, or just as a general question?
You can vote, you just can't move the minutes, the acceptance of the minutes, is my understanding. Sorry, yeah, confirm minutes. Go on.
Sorry, I think the CEO might have given you some good advice there. That we're not confirming the minutes, we're just noting.
We're noting the minutes, that's right, yeah. So you're right to put up your hand one way or another, Councillor Finnegan. No questions. Does any councillor wish to move a motion? Thanks, Councillor Costin. Seconder, Councillor White, to be opposed. Thank you. Did you wish to speak to this, Councillor Costin?
Just quickly, Mayor, another great read in the agenda. I'm disappointed to have stepped back from the Audit and Risk Committee. I found it quite informative looking at council activities in more depth, but I commend other councillors and the public to read the minutes, and if they want to find out in more detail what council is doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor White, did you wish to say anything?
I'm having a bit of deja vu here, but just to, again, it was Councillor Costin's, I think, last meeting was December, and to say thank you to him for participating on that and welcoming Councillor Hanson to the committee. It is a very informative committee. I've learned a lot along the way, and I'm still learning a lot more, but it's a very important part of what we do as council.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, I'd like to share and thank Councillor Costin for his efforts on this committee, and perhaps to give some assurance both for the public from a government's point of view and also our newer councillors that all councillors, get to see the agenda. It is a confidential agenda, so I think it is worth noting that all councillors have the opportunity to see the agenda and what's in that. And I believe it's in our content locker, so you can even go back to old agendas and have a look if you want to see all the detail behind these minutes. I'm looking at you, Councillor Finnegan.
Looking at it right now, Councillor Hart.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Thanks, councillors. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. It's carried 6-0. Item 9.11, authorisation of officer under the Planning and Environment Act. Councillors, do we have any questions of officers? Thank you. We have a recommendation in front of us, councillors. Anyone like to move a motion? Thanks, Councillor White. To be seconded. Thanks, Councillor Hanson. To be opposed. Thanks, Councillor White.
Not to say too much, but it's an important part of our administrative processes to ensure that we put people in the right positions, and I'm assured that this appointment is the correct one for our council.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. Thank you. Councillors, I'll put the motion to vote. All those in favour? Thank you. It's carried 6-0. Councillors, next item is just for noting, and the remaining items for consideration of council that will be heard in closed session. So that concludes the. Sorry. On moving into yeah. So that'll conclude the public. Open session of the council meeting. Could I have a mover that we move into Councillor Hanson first, I think, and then Councillor Finnegan will do. We moved into closed session. Councillors, all those in favour? Thank you. So for the people in the gallery, sorry, we're moving into closed session now.